So today, let's talk about groups, a site feature that I'm sure tons of Roblox users have a stake in some way. Groups help make this game inherently social, whether it's fan clubs or places to identify yourself with others, but the main two are war clans and these social groups like organizations that will paint with a broad brush. Let's also talk about how the state of groups got here to today, how they became a split between for fun and for fighting and spread across hundreds of thousands of pre-existing groups. Obviously, in the beginning there was no such thing as a group on Roblox, only some unofficial ones. There was actually a Clans and Guilds subsection on the forum set aside for people that want to meet up and pretend to be in one, but I don't really know why they use guilds anymore because nobody even uses that name now. But anyway, up until 2009, there was really only this subsection to mutually agree to be in a group. And arguably the biggest group at that time was abbreviated as the X100 First, led by a user named Lord Nathan. At that point, organizing users was so chaotic that really the only way to become a member of these groups was to go out and buy a uniform and put it on. So like, VIP clothing back in the day was so basic that as long as you owned it and wore it, you could walk into a base and grab a gun from a vending machine and then earn the right to patrol. Now, for all there is in organization, there's also chaos, so the X100 First grew so much that there would be users, outsiders actually wandering around and even trying to break in. And of course they'd just be mowed down and flame wars would start, but it started to become a template for what raids were supposed to be. And this mess ended in about the latter half of 2009 when the groups feature was finally rolled out. Though Lord Nathan actually had to buy the X100 First name off of a forumer who got to it first, but the point is that groups now had a trackable list of members to tell who was in, and they could actually gain some recognition outside of the Clans and Guilds subsection. So for a time, war groups sort of became the law of the land. You had, in the span of a year, all these big names rolling out. You had the X100 First, of course, you had Fear, UCR, Rat, Factovian Empire, Vortex Security. A lot of this revolved around defending your own base and warding off other groups. Now, combat was the selling point for these war groups at the time, and that was because there were so many brick battle places and sword fighting arenas and vehicle war games on the front page of these days that KOs, knockouts became the statistic that indicated your superiority in these war groups. Now, fighting did get boring. Groups at one point decided to get more mature, they organized drills, they want to take themselves more seriously, and the owner of Fear wrote in a blog post at one point that it became less about ranking up people based on KOs and more about their dedication and leadership in the group. Less was it important to spawn kill somebody and more about how well you could keep your group mates in line. By 2012, it soon looked so promising for these war groups at the time. Roblox recognized their importance and set aside special reservations for these top dogs at their conventions, announced features which involved advanced roles and coordinated raids, a leaderboard for the best of the best. The future for war groups looked to be a reliable way to earn renown and recognition throughout the entire site. Now, if you don't remember these promises, that's probably where the stumbling block comes in. Now, it took Roblox nearly 2 years to think about how they wanted to implement a way to make battle achievements, among other things, displayable to everyone on the site. That came in the form of player points in the spring of 2014. For the sake of time, I have to explain them a little loosely, but basically, game creators could decide to script certain ways that would reward these player points, and they would show up on individual user profiles, the game page leaderboards, and eventually on these wargroup pages which had truckloads of experienced fighters. But only about 100 members or so could rake in these special clan points. But the point is that now every group had a reason to be more competitive and more cutthroat towards the entire site. On their own, player points became easily exploitable in individual games. Users could get their counts up to the hundreds of thousands because the admins kept increasing the limit of how many you could earn and how many that these games could give away, so things got out of hand pretty quick. This rampant competitiveness between individual players and their clans tried to be contained in the August 2014 event Clan Battles. But there were still accusations of boosting and exploiter problems in these admin-created games. It was all just for hats? But I think it slowed down some of the innovations that groups would receive in the future, and certainly how they'd be ranked. Player points disappeared altogether from many areas of the site in that September, and the admins let game creators decide whether they want leaderboards in their games. Nowadays, the leaderboards are mostly gone from from games entirely because they don't want to give exploiters a platform to be famous. War groups still have clans as a division of their members, but nothing more has come out of them. Certainly, not another clan battle. The point of that tangent is that this was the height of combative skill in Roblox. The best games were the ones that you could wage war the most comfortably in. And in about a year after that point, war games and war groups soon dried up just like that. The developers' exchange caused a huge shift in game purposes. The point was to raise Robux, so were developers going to stick a bunch of cosmetic purchases in their war games? And there were some like the sword fighting tournament, but games like Call of Robloxia and Daxter's Paintball, those sort of petered out. A, a bit of a younger player base was deciding to join tycoons and more social hangouts, and worst of all, knockouts were removed from user profiles because it was so easy to exploit them, and because the admins felt that Roblox's purpose was more than just fighting people. The lifeblood of war games and war groups was drying out. Also, groups became loaded with ways to buy goods from. They could sell services, they could flesh out their organization and make chains. Somewhere along the line of all this, there was this huge uprising in groups' role-playing potential to go along with this watered-down combat style. You had groups representing just about every country and micronation in the world, and they had their own politicians and military branches to go along with them. If you throw in like the groups representing historical armies of the past, you have war groups trying to stay afloat, but they were spread out across hundreds of similar ones doing the same thing. There was a lot of fragmentation, but soon there was momentum pulling it all together. It started by copying real pre-existing companies and trying to imitate how those businesses worked in-game. Why not have a bunch of Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts places? Why not make your own and stand out, call it Frappe, and instantly have a bunch of players wanting to join and spend their time interacting with other users in these more ambitious, more sociable groups? The point I'm trying to get at here is that war groups sort of had this rigid formula in their structure. It got to the point where barking orders at players that are lower ranked than you and making them train at these exact schedules got a little demanding in the eyes of some members. Organization groups have extensive rules too, but to participate in them is a little more fun. I mean, isn't it better to be serving people coffee instead of fighting clans all the time and getting mad at people? The paradigm shift that you see, and the reasons why big groups of today focus around these corporations where role-playing is more important than fighting, is just the result of players wanting to move up constantly and feeling part of the bigger picture. I personally like the sorts of hybrid groups that balance interacting with others and protecting themselves. I don't know why they have to post their group rules in the wrong forum subsection and sometimes copy them word from the United States Constitution, but hey. There's still a healthy dose of war groups out there, but the reasons why organizational groups got so popular is because there's sort of a disliking to fighting all the time. There's plenty of possibilities to what you can realistically roleplay, and yes, there's tons of Robux to be made and payouts to the group officers. And trust me, making money for these groups has always been sort of the goal since the beginning. Ever since you had to buy a uniform so you could walk through the front gate of a base. There's also the eternal question of what's better, a big group or a small group. On the one hand, with more people, you have the better potential to be rich, and you have a name that can be widely recognized across the entire site. Or, does the group collapse under its own weight from all the people piling onto the bandwagon and not taking their duties as seriously? Shouldn't a group leader be able to keep track of all of its members and make sure they're all on the same page? And also, the larger a group gets, the harder it is for it to escape criticism from all the people outside the group system, who always think that those in groups are taking their jobs way too seriously. Groups have come a long way since their creation in 2009, and while there have been some features that sold short on it, like no coordinated rating system or a way to battle over turf like the groups of old would have wanted, the admins have set groups up with mechanics to encourage social interactions rather than violent ones. That's just how I personally see it. I'm interested to hear the experiences of others in their groups because, as hard as it is to believe, I've never been a member of any of really big ones. Except for maybe one of those unofficial groups back in the day that disrupted the X100 first, but in any case, that is my messy history of the groups feature, so thank you very much for watching this discussion video, and I hope to see you again soon.